Okay, I think it's time to start. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Totally appreciate people tuning in this morning. My name is Janine Yancey. For those who don't know, I'm the founder and CEO of M-Train, and we're pleased to do our regular LinkedIn Live discussion. And my guest today is David Brezinski, M-Train's cybersecurity expert. So David is a information security architect at Juniper Networks. Did I get that right, David? Your exact title?
Close enough. Director of Security Architecture and Engineering. But
oh yes, sorry about that, David. And what we love about David is he is our expert, like I said, on our information security and cybersecurity content, lessons, and courses and such, giving us kind of the current best practices and thinking on these issues. And we asked David here today because we suspected that there was changes afoot post-COVID when we're all working from home, and connected with David, and he said yes, there definitely is. So what we're going to talk about today is what the current situation is in terms of our vulnerabilities and the security of our data, and some kind of best practices that we can keep top of mind and on our radar to be more secure and more buttoned up. And David's going to help us with that. And David, to start with, when you and I were talking about this last week, you had kind of directed my attention to the FBI cyber division, which showed that we're all experiencing, so post-COVID, so figure mid-March, since then we're all experiencing about 4,000 cyber attacks a day. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Janine, unfortunately. And again, a lot of these attacks really are focused on exploiting the human element, right? Human error, people not being careful in what they do. And that's always been true, right? But, whenever there's something on the scope and magnitude of COVID, worldwide event, there are always bad actors that are trying to exploit an emotional response to this stuff, right? And so, it's kind of like, you think about it, do people actually lock their door at home, and do you alarm, right? Most people do lock their doors, so people can't just walk in off the street. And really, the digital world is no different, right? We think about the internet, and it's not just our local town or neighborhood. We're talking about the world we now have access to one another across the world, right? And so the threat landscape is, as we like to talk about cybersecurity, is massive. Now, with everyone working, most people working remotely, we're all trying to navigate this new situation, all the uncertainty. We're juggling our families, our business activities. I don't want to say people are more lax, but I think that people may not be paying as much attention as they should. And as a result, the hackers are having a field day. And that was indicated in the FBI stats that you just shared.
Yeah. So, John, do you mind putting that graph up again? Because I think that's like really kind of eye-popping. If you just see, it's kind of steady state, and then it just goes up, pretty dramatically since March.
Yeah.
Right. So if folks want to take a look at this, and I think circulate that just to raise awareness for all of us. And so, David, what I heard you say is so many of us, mid-March went to work from home, and we're juggling a lot. The lines between business and personal are definitely more blurred now than they've ever been. And so there's just a whole lot more like surfacing and on our consciousness, and it's hard to be focused on best practices and being totally buttoned up and protecting our data and our information for work. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. And so what if we have to kind of stack rank the vulnerabilities? What would you put as the top of the list, David? What's like the number one thing that gets people in trouble?
Yeah, so undoubtedly, phishing, email phishing is still in the. I think there's one vulnerability or top risk that leads to data breaches above that, and that's related to denial of service type attacks. But this is a reoccurring theme. It's not new, and it's always over the past 5 years or so, it's really been in the top three, and that is really email phishing. There's various forms. There's like smishing, which is SMS texting. Okay. So it comes in various forms, but that is really the number one thing that leads to data breaches. And it's important to remind people that phishing, it's a social engineering attack where a bad actor, and that bad actor could be a nation state, it could be an organized crime ring, it could be an individual that's just trying to take advantage of someone, mostly oriented toward financial gain, not always. Yeah. But the bad actor tries to assume a trusted identity or establish some level of trust with the recipient, right? And again, this is this comes in a number of different forms. I think many of us, I know I've received unsolicited Amazon shipment emails where it's like, hey, your shipment has shipped. Click on this link to check status. And what do a lot of people do? They click on the link because who doesn't use Amazon, right? Right. So phishing is definitely the biggest challenge today.
And then disguising the sender from some, to be some trusted source. I'll readily admit, this was last year. A couple of my colleagues, got an apparent email from me. And luckily for all of us, they like pinged me and said, Janine, I got this email and you're asking for money. Do you really need money? I'm like, oh, okay, that's a red flag. So I think, these emails where they're disguised to look like they're coming from somebody else. And maybe some kind of easy kind of guidelines are, if it's asking for money, if it's asking you to click on anything, if it raises your eyebrows, it raises your eyebrows or makes you crinkle your eyebrows, that's a sign. Don't click on it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, and again in cybersecurity parlance, we call them bad actors. It's anyone with malicious or ill intent, right? But they're getting better. They're 5-10 years ago, a lot of times you could read one of these emails and you could usually pick it out because there were a lot of grammatical errors. Right. Sometimes what they were trying to say or express really didn't make sense, right? But they're definitely getting a lot better. And to your point, Janine, they do want to try to create an emotional response, right? Generate some excitement or hook you in such a way, and that's why we call it phishing, right? So really, it's all about good old-fashioned social engineering, and that means someone messages you or sends you an email. They're trying to establish some level of trust. And they may say, hey, I'm with your IT department. My name's John. I'm with the IT department. And I need for you to provide me your user ID and your password so I can verify that your access is set up appropriately. And would you provide that? And you would be surprised at how many people will do that. Provide information openly.
Twitter just had that happen, right? I mean, into Elon Musk's account, Barack Obama's account, Apple's account. Example. Yep. That was somebody giving information. And I think maybe I'm always looking for what are the easy kind of things to remember, like checklists for ourselves. And an easy checklist would be, a two-step authentication. It's like, great, you want that? Send me something, or whatever it is. Yeah. It's like, you got to have a two-step authentication so that it's not just a one-step trigger.
That's right. Yeah. That's a great point. And, that doesn't always have to come in a form of technology, right? Technology is great. It enables us, no doubt about it. And from a security standpoint, there's a lot of tools and capabilities that we implement to protect us. If you look at Twitter in the example you just brought up, right, where again, good old social engineering, they claim they were from Twitter IT and they were able to obtain credentials and then get in and do additional damage, right?
Yeah.
Companies spend millions of dollars on security software and applications, and yet it just takes one person to basically provide information to a bad actor to undo all of that investment. One action, right? And so your point is it's really critical that humans, we are the firewall, human firewall, we call it. And one thing that I've been telling people that I work with and that I try to educate in my own environment at Juniper Networks is trust nothing, verify everything. And that's not convenient. It's not always easy. It's not fun. It's not always timely. But in doing that, you can end up saving yourself and your company so much more time, money, and effort versus possibly being breached or having your identity stolen, as an example.
Right, right. Well, it's just it's a bit of discipline and intentionality, and the consequences for not doing it can be pretty friggin' dramatic. So I mean, I appreciate your comment, David, that organizations, and I know our audience will appreciate this because they're stakeholders, organizations spend tens of millions of dollars to try to make all of their information secure. And they have InfoSec teams like your team that are robust, that are very sharp. And even with all of that, one human error and it's all for naught. So, that's kind of the world we live in right now. So other than phishing, what other vulnerability would you put at the top of the list?
Yeah, so I think another one, and again, this has really been highlighted as a result of COVID, and a lot of us, and myself included, at Juniper Networks, we really had to adapt and work to address the fact that we now had over 10,000 people working remotely.
Wow.
Right, and we're a networking and security company, right. and we had to make adjustments. Can
we just pause there for a second, David? I don't want to brush over that. I mean, just the enormity of one InfoSec team supporting 10,000 people working remotely. That's not in a kind of established set environment, that. And I'm just appreciating the amount of stress on InfoSec teams all across, the world right now that are tasked with being the responsible party for security. And we've just introduced all of these variables.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I have to say in my company's case, and I'm not here to talk about Juniper per se, but we were fortunate in that we are a technology company and we are reasonably mature in terms of the security controls and the tools and the IT that we use and we leverage. So we're, in many respects, not to brag, but we're better off than a lot of other enterprises and smaller, companies out there that they don't have business continuity. They don't have a dedicated InfoSec team. They don't have the technology that we have, right? And so in that respect, we have fared pretty well. But the point I want to make, and this is also, it's been highlighted and exacerbated by COVID, and that is misconfigurations. So if you think about it, here we are, we're in this new dynamic and reality where a lot of companies are having to support their employees working remote. And they had to rush to figure out how do we enable this so that we can make sure that our employees are still able to work, but also make sure that we're not opening ourselves up to undue risk and such. And what we have found is that a lot of enterprises have had some major misconfigurations that have been applied. So an example is who's not using things like Google Drive or Dropbox or Slack, right? And some of these companies, because they don't have experts or infosec experts that have the security mindset or focus, they actually had misconfigurations, and that led to data and other information being shared to those that it shouldn't have been shared, right?
Yeah.
So really, it's really important that people pay attention to that. And, Google can be useful in that if you're not sure, you can go out and search, and a lot of times you'll find useful information about how do I secure my Google Drive? How do I secure Dropbox? How do I secure my Slack implementation, right? To make sure that I'm not unduly opening this up to unauthorized access and use, which could turn into a larger data breach concern.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, I think that one simple kind of guideline is, as a starting point, everything should be not set to everyone available to view. So like I know on Google Drive, the enterprise version, their default is everyone can view something. It's like, oh, no. You get to be, very specific.
Right, exactly. And another point I wanted to, I think, important out of compliance people on this call, it's important to, if you don't have policies, at minimum, I would say that an organization and rules it's really because of become a all. We'll just go out and do whatever this was most convenient to get the job done, not because they're malicious like that. Right? But they're just trying to do what they need to do. At the same time, if you don't provide this is what is exposed, that can lead to broader problems because now you spend for people where they need to do your job.
Okay. So maybe if you could repeat the last bit of that, David, I had a little hard time. I think it was maybe your internet connection or mine. I can see you now. Okay. I can hear you now. Yeah, no, now you're great. But if sum that up real quickly.
Okay. No. So what I was saying is another point about like configurations and people, not understanding how to configure something so that they reduce the potential threat of unauthorized access. What I was saying is, I know that you have compliance-oriented people likely attending this this call, and organizations stipulate what acceptance is, what cloud-based or applications are to be used to conduct business. Right? I think that helps in that. It then is something that they reference, and it doesn't become a free-for-all where they're just going out and putting company data or whatever just to get their job done, right? So that's what my point was. It's really important to provide that guidance to say, here's what you should be. You still able to hear me, or are we dropping off?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. So let's see, we've got a little bit of time left, and I want us to cover just quickly your thoughts on passwords, passphrases. That's always a common question. So how would you address that?
How did I know you were going to go there, Janine? So
it's always evolving, I know.
Yeah, no, suffice it to say, it's controversial even in IT and cybersecurity domains. I mean, there's a lot of debate about using strong passwords versus passphrases. And what I will say is there's no perfect answer, and there is no one answer to the problem. What I will say, based on my own experience, having worked in IT and cybersecurity for over 30 years now, is there's a lot of guidance out there. One of them that I utilize, because my company, we do a lot of U.S. government based work and support, and that is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they have actual guidance in terms of using passwords and passphrases. And you can go to NIST.gov and search, and it's a little technical in some parts, but it does provide some useful input about using passphrases versus passwords. Also, using password managers, I think, is a good practice. So we all have multiple passwords. Well, hopefully we all have multiple passwords. And using a password manager is a way that we can store, categorize, and maintain and manage those passwords in a reasonably secure manner, rather than writing them down, putting them in Excel spreadsheets or a Word document on our system, which again is ripe for someone to steal and then gain access to other stuff, right? So I use passphrases myself. However, there are a lot of organizations and businesses and banks and others where you can't. They have limits on passwords and passphrases, right? You can't go over a certain number of characters. You can't use meta characters or strange characters. You have to use alphanumeric, right? So it's going to vary greatly, and that's another problem with passwords across the industry. Is there's no one set standard across everything to say this is how you have to do this, right?
Right.
But, if I may say, the one thing I want to say and reiterate to everyone is never, ever, ever use your same corporate password for your personal password. Use different passwords, because if you think about it, again, the bad guys are really good at stealing credentials and getting the password information. And if you use the same password across different applications and such, guess what? You've just made their job much easier.
Right.
And then lastly, sorry, Janine, lastly, where possible, use a second factor. And this is like using your mobile device where you receive a pin or a text. If that's an option, use it. It just provides another layer of additional security.
Oh, definitely. No, I certainly appreciate that. So I think we all learn by stories. Do you have a couple quick stories in your industry, in your network, that you can share with us as kind of illustrations of what happens when people are not disciplined and intentional?
Yeah, so both of these happened within the past couple months, not within my organization, but I do participate in different incident threat and intelligence gathering sessions with similar companies, and so we hear these stories about these things. So one recent one is another company based out of Silicon Valley has a bunch of third-party partners. One of them, in response to C-19, was working to enable remote access. So they went about activating Microsoft Remote Desktop, RDP, on a number of internet-facing systems, so that, again, employees could connect and be able to access applications that were behind the corporate firewall, right? And what happened was, in their haste in getting this activated, they didn't check the patching levels on those servers, and the servers were vulnerable. And they were basically within approximately 40-something seconds, when something is exposed to the internet, it's being attacked. It's being scanned. There are tools out there that are trying to see what ports are listening on the given device. And so basically they found this vulnerable RDP server, and they hacked it, and the company lost data as a result.
Wow. You had another story that you had shared with me last week about an HR professional, and I know that our audience, has so many HR professionals in it that they might appreciate that story.
Yeah. So again, this is, someone that was just basically trying to do their job, but it's another example of, we have to be the firewall. We have to think about what we're doing in our, cyber connected world today, right? And so it was an HR person. We love our HR people, but she wanted to work on something during the weekend at home. And so what she ended up doing was she ended up copying a spreadsheet that contained her whole company's employee list, all of their salary information, all of their home address information, all of their dependent names, everything that we would consider to be, PII and then some.
Yeah.
And she copied it to a Dropbox that she at the time didn't realize was basically open, shared to the world, to everyone.
Oh, yikes.
And so it was wide open, and fortunately it didn't lead. They don't believe it led to a full disclosure, but a bunch of people had to get involved. They had to do a review. Legal had to get involved. If you get to a certain number of records, it's just not fun, and it could have ended up being a lot worse than it did. But it's just another example that, it reinforces the point that we really have to pay attention to what we're doing, and how we're configuring things.
So thank you, David. I think that's super helpful to kind of remember. And if you had to kind of leave us all with kind of your one big kind of ask and recommendation, what would it be?
We all have to have skin in the game in security, right? As an InfoSec professional, I can't control what you do, and nor would I ever try. The technology can help in terms of protecting us, but it's not foolproof, right? And so I think, the biggest thing is really about integrating a security mindset into the organization, and really impressing upon people that, look, we all have to be in this together. Just like with COVID and some of the challenges that we're all confronted with, we're really better when we come together and we communicate and we take responsibility and we have skin in the game and we're looking out for one another. And that's really true in the cybersecurity domain. It's really important that we all help one another, we communicate, we think about what we're doing, and that we have responsibility in helping to protect our organization and our own data, right? And so, we all have to commit to a good outcome. We can all spend millions of dollars on security software, right? But again, that one click can undo all of it. And it reminds me, very quickly, this is a recent example. So a friend of mine, I'm an IT guy, and I'm always often providing friends and family technical input on stuff. Hey, I have a question. And so a friend of mine's like, hey, I want to put in a home security system. And do you have any recommendations? And I don't work in that space, but I did a little research and said, here, I think that this is a great option for you. He went to the time and effort to put it in, right? This nice system, and found out that recently that his home was broken into and burglarized.
Oh no.
So my first question to him was, hey, so you set the alarm, right? Nope. Oh. So for dramatic effect.
Yeah.
And again, it's those types of things that, we have the tools at times, we have the technology, we can pause and cross-check and validate. And sometimes we don't do that, and it just leads to these negative outcomes.
Yeah, so thank you for that, David. I think that really resonates with me. I think that has broader application, but if I could just kind of sum it up by what I heard you say is, you could have the most, expert, robust information security organization around, spending millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars on applications, but it's a shared commitment, and these are disciplines that we all need to kind of adopt. Because I liked your phrase, we are the human firewall. So the extent that any of us is not thinking and just kind of being a little bit, forgetful and not disciplined, then we've just created a whole open port basically to our organization.
Yep, that's right. And again, I think that it's important, training is critical on this front. Annual is not enough. You've got to keep this in front of people, keep it small, digestible, but it's really important that there's an ongoing dialogue because we all get busy. So that's really important.
So thank you for that segue, because I'll take a minute to remind everyone in our audience that when you partner with M-Train, it provides access to our whole library on what we call the tricky culture issues, which includes information security and cybersecurity, as integrated with David's thought leadership. Thank you, David, for your best practices in our course. I think we're going to be coming out with a few micro video lessons because, to your point, David, I think it's about bite-sized learning that you can do on your phone for 5 minutes as people are grabbing a cup of coffee, because these are issues that should not be a yearly one and done. They should be at least once a quarter. You get a little micro video lesson, keeping these ideas top of mind so people remember them.
That's right.
Perhaps you and I will think about how to do a phishing lesson and a data configuration lesson and maybe one other lesson, David. So
absolutely.
It's a little past the top of the hour, so I want to thank you, David, for joining us and chatting. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
And thank everyone else for tuning in, and just for everyone's kind of understanding, we do LinkedIn Live discussions with all of our domain experts every second and fourth Tuesday of the month at this time. So please follow us on LinkedIn and you'll get notified of our upcoming LinkedIn Live discussions. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, David, and have a great day.
Thank you. Be well. Be safe.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.